I'm sure all of us like to have a lot of different varieties of flowering plants in our garden, and many times we purchase a lot of seasonal flowers regularly from the nursery. But a lot of times, once we bring them home, we notice that the flowers start reducing gradually, and over a period of time, there are no new flowers blooming on the plant. Sometimes there are occasional couple of blooms, and sometimes there are no blooms at all. We would try a few different ways to revive the plant and get lots of new blooms. But if nothing works, then we get disappointed and discard the plant. I'm saying this from our experience too, because when we were new to gardening and we didn't know a lot about maintaining and growing flowers, this has happened and we've been disappointed and discarded a lot of plants. Hi and welcome to Fresh from My Garden. In today's video, I'm talking about some important tips on growing and maintaining flowering plants and also to get a lot of blooms during the flowering season. Flowering plants are grouped into two categories. One is the annual flowering plant that blooms only or grows only for a year, and perennials that you can prune back and which comes back every year. This is a celosia, which is an annual flowering plant and dies after the flowering season, whereas Ixora is an evergreen tropical perennial that blooms year after year. All of these flowering plants, whether they are annuals or perennials, need good soil, the right temperature, proper watering, nutrients, and also the right amount of sunlight so that they can bloom well during the flowering season. There are a few tips to increase the number of flowers that you get on your plants, which is what I'm discussing about in today's video. When preparing the soil to grow or pot flowering plants, along with garden soil, it is always good to use some compost or cow dung manure or NPK granules. NPK granules are nutrients that boost the flowering of a plant. You can also make homemade organic fertilizer for your flowering plants using eggshells, banana peels, coffee grounds, and tea waste. We use these in our garden for a lot of flowers, and you can check the link in the description on how to make this organic fertilizer at home. When you're growing annual flowers like celosia or marigold, zinnias, sunflowers, etc., you can save the seeds from the dried flowers and save them to plant during the next season. This is what we usually do every year with all our marigold, sunflower, and zinnia plants. The seeds are available at the base of the flower once the flower has dried out completely. But with perennial plants, pruning is the most important thing to get the maximum blooms or flowers during its flowering season. Pinching the tips or removing the spent flowers from the plant will encourage more flowers and more growth, new growth on the plant. This is the red star glory from the family of morning glory, and this flower is an annual which forms seeds once the flower has dried out. And these are rain lilies, which are perennials from the crocus family, and they usually bloom during the rainy season and come back every year. So, with flowers like these, like the gladiolus and rain lilies, These are usually grown from bulbs and come back every year. Some people like to dig out the bulbs and save them and plant them again next year, but we usually leave ours in the ground since we don't have freezing weather. Roses do best in warm and tropical weather, and they need to be pruned regularly for them to produce a lot of beautiful bunches of flowers. Lantanas are drought resistant, beautiful flowering plants that grow wild and beautiful with very little care, but with more pruning, we will get more bunches of flowers and a lot of new growth, as you can see here. So, as you saw the different varieties of flowers from our garden, different plants have different requirements when it comes to watering and sunlight. But with annuals and perennials, the main thumb rule with perennials is that all perennials need to be pruned regularly after the flowering season so that they can grow new shoots and new flowers during its flowering season. The main reason why we notice that the plants that we bring home just flower for a few days and then there are no more new shoots, new growth, or new flowering that is happening on the plants is due to lack of pruning. Pruning is the most important thing to do in order to get lots of flowers on your flowering plants. Another reason why we might not be seeing regular blooming of flowers is due to lack of sunlight. Most flowering plants need at least 5 to 6 hours of sunlight every day. Although there are a few flowering plants that cannot tolerate harsh direct sunlight, they still do need some filtered light or filtered sunlight so that they can produce more flowers. Flowers like the clematis or bleeding heart, geraniums, etc., do well in partial shade or partial sunlight. They flower well even if they are exposed to a couple of hours of morning sunlight and afternoon shade. But with plants like roses, plumerias, lantanas, chrysanthemums, marigolds, and sunflowers, they do need regular and direct sunlight for at least 5 to 6 hours so that they can produce a lot of beautiful flowers. Most flowering plants need regular watering at least once in 2 days, except plants like plumeria and desert rose, which have thick stems and hold water and do not need to be watered unless the soil is dry. Even when watering other flowering plants, make sure to check if the soil is dry or moist before you water them. Too much of watering will cause a root rot of the plant and the plant can completely die. Flowering plants like lantanas are drought resistant and will do fine even if they are not watered for 2-3 days at a time. Plants that are not drought tolerant might wither a little if not watered for a day or two, but definitely overwatering will cause the root system to rot and will instantly kill the plant. So, you should always make sure to take care not to overwater your plants. Fertilizing regularly at least once in 2 or 3 weeks during the flowering season will encourage and boost the flower growth of your flowering plants. NPK granules can be added near the base of the plant or mixed in with the soil at the time of potting, and at the same time you can also use rose mix or homemade fertilizer every 15 to 21 days. Once the flowering season is over, deadhead or prune back all the dried stems and branches of all your perennial flowering plants as they go into dormancy until the next flowering season. Make sure you don't overwater or fertilize these plants during the dormancy period. Start regular watering and regular fertilizing only once the flowering season begins. So, with these care tips, you can make sure that all your flowering plants bloom and look beautiful throughout the flowering season. Always remember to pinch off those dried off and spent blooms. Prune or deadhead your plants at the end of the growing season and water and fertilize regularly throughout the flowering season. By following these tips, you can grow different beautiful varieties of flowering plants in your garden. Hope you found all these tips really useful. Happy gardening. Thanks for watching Fresh from My Garden.